you've got nothing. Someone has to be evacuated out in the middle of the night, night vision goggles at 50 feet off the ground. You know that what you were doing tonight, it's life or death.
Coming to the stage to help us learn how to empower and trust our people, like our business and our lives depend on it. Please join me in welcoming best-selling author, thought leader, and donut lover, Lieutenant Colonel Jason Harris.
I'm new to this, obviously, and I don't understand technology. Don't worry about it. I'll get it, brother. I'll make it work. Here we go. If you guys couldn't tell, it's my first time. I was talking to Matt, who's married to Christy. He walks up to me, Christy with Rogers Group, and he walks up to me and says, "Hey, I don't know if you heard, brother, but the speaker's pretty terrible." Are you? I walked away. I said, "Man, Matt, you're awfully kind. I appreciate you doing that for me." Rule number one, if y'all don't laugh at my jokes, I'm going to laugh because I think I'm a comedian, all right? Well, first and foremost, thank you so much, John, for having me here. And I want to clear the record because if I don't clear the record for Chris, I'll be in trouble with Chris. He didn't crash a plane technically. He ejected out of a plane and the plane itself crashed, all right? Let's just get that straight. I don't want Chris coming back talking that I messed it up, all right? And I got to say, I'm pretty honored to be able to have Chris recommend me. I'm going to talk about a lot of things, or a few things today, and I hope you take at least one or two things back to your team. Hope you can employ one or two things in your world today. But before I even jump into that, I just want to express the power of connection, the power of mentoring, and the power of coaching. And that's what Chris has been for me. If you guys haven't had a chance to meet Chris, take a moment to figure out who he is, get to know that guy, and learn a little bit from him. The funny thing is that Chris and I, we've written a book together, me, him, and 3 other pilots. Funny thing is I was the only one who wasn't a fighter pilot. I was the real pilot of the group, John. Don't tell him that. But the amazing thing is we wrote a book. Chris and I have built this amazing friendship and relationship. And guess what? We have never met each other face to face. We've never met face to face. So right now, for those who are challenged by connections and building teams, mentoring, coaching virtually, that personally is a testament that it can be done. But you got to be intentional about it. So I'm going to ask you guys a question. Anybody in here ever had that moment of just absolute fear, sheer terror? Anybody ever had that moment where you just thought, man, this is it, and you didn't know what was going to happen next? Or perhaps you've had that moment where it's been absolute exhilaration, excitement, like Disney World level of excitement. Have you had that moment where they intersected to each other? For me, I've had a lot of those moments, and where that moment of intersection of fear and sheer terror and exhilaration, I liken that moment of intersection to one word: trust. So as I was going through the course of my career, I thought about this one particular event or moment that occurred for me personally, and that was just after my freshman year of college at the United States Air Force Academy. I was 19 years old, and they offer us several different summer programs, and I signed up for Airmanship 490. Now, for those who are unfamiliar with Air Force terminology, Airmanship 490 simply means skydiving. And for those who don't know what that means, it's simply jumping out of a perfectly good airplane for no good reason at all, sir. Now, you're probably wondering early in the morning, why would you do such a crazy thing? Well, number one, I'm 4th generation military. My mother served in the Army, she was enlisted. My grandfather, her father, he served in Vietnam and in the Korean conflict. And I wanted to make the old man proud. And of course, I wanted to put those black leather jump boots for good use. So I decided that I would take this skydiving class. Now, what you gotta understand is that this course is uniquely designed, different than any other skydiving program in the country and possibly the world. Anybody out here ever been skydiving? Just one brave soul or 2 crazy souls. Adventurous, but the reality is when you go to a civilian skydive place, your first jump, when you jump out of that airplane, you've got somebody connected to you and they're making all the decisions. Not us. We were gonna jump out of a perfect good airplane all by ourselves, or in my case, get pushed out of a perfect good airplane. So we show up Monday morning, And when we show up, they do the physical fitness test to make sure that if you get yourself in a pickle, you have the ability to get out of it. And then they proceed to start teaching us everything that it takes to jump out of this airplane safely. And then once they get done teaching you all the things that can go right, they then begin to teach you everything that can go wrong. And let me tell you, when you jump out of an airplane at 4,000 feet above the ground, there are a lot of things that can go horribly wrong, sir. So, we get through the training, and on Friday of the exact same week that we started, it's now showtime. Friday morning, it's a beautiful Colorado morning in the summertime. We walk down to the hangar, we get our parachutes on, and we're starting to look at each other, you know. You're looking at your friends, your classmates, and your peers, and you look with that nervous laugh, you're like, you gonna do this? I'm scared, but I don't want you to think I'm scared. I know you're scared, and you know that I'm scared, but we're gonna act like we are not scared at all. So we're looking at each other with this nervous energy, and we're getting everything together, and we're like, okay, we're actually gonna do this. So then they march us on out to the airplane, climb into the airplane, and I figured, if I'm the last one in the airplane, I should be the last one out. So I get to the back of the line. And we're going to get into the airplane, and I'm the last one in the airplane, and I sit down towards the backside of the airplane. They start the engines up, they taxi out to the runway, and as they're taxiing out to the runway, I'm thinking, the door's still open. They're going to close it before we take off. But we get on the active runway, they add full power, and we start cruising down the runway at full speed. As we get faster and faster, the noise gets louder and louder, and I hear the air rushing through that back door, and I'm starting to panic. Still thinking somebody's going to close the door. We break ground, we start climbing, the noise is getting louder, the air is coming in harder, and I'm starting to panic and freaking out. And what you got to understand is the reason I am freaking out right now is because I'm actually afraid of heights. Yeah, no, seriously, I know I fly airplanes, but I'm actually really afraid of heights. And I don't want to fall out of this airplane before I have the chance to get pushed out of this airplane. And so I look back at my classmates, my peers, and then I look at the jump master, and the jump master's just calm, and I figure, well, it must be okay, so just act like it's normal. So I sit there and act like it's normal. I steady my nerves, and as I steady my nerves, I begin to take in the surrounding scenery. We get up to 4,000 feet above the ground, and it's the most beautiful scenery as we're on island with the Rocky Mountains. And as I'm staring out at the Rocky Mountains, the silence comes to an abrupt halt when the jump master says, stand by. When he says stand by, he looks at me. And he points at me and he says, stand by, and he motions, and I'm supposed to slide by the door, and I'm like, oh wait, this is part of the training. So I slide by the open door. My anxiety levels are starting to rise a little bit. The jump out, or the pilot's giving the go, says green light, and they're ready to push people out of the airplane. He says, stand in the door. My anxiety level goes up a little bit higher. I go to get into the door, and you gotta put one knee down at the door, and you're kneeling, and I put my hand there at the edge of the door, and he says, no, put your head out the door. And I put my head out the door, my lips start flapping left and right, and I start freaking out. I look down at the ground 4,000 feet, and I look and I go, this is really stupid. Not sure if you've ever stared down from an open airplane at 4,000 feet and realized how stupid of an idea this is, but I did. And I'm like, okay, this is the go moment. And I can hear my peers, my classmates in the back of the airplane, and they're yelling words of encouragement that starts with F and B and, 4-letter words that you wouldn't say in front of your daughter. And I said, well, look, I'm not going to be one, but I might scream like one. And I'm sitting there in the open door, and the jump master, he realizes it's time for me to get out of the airplane. He says, go. And with all the courage that I can muster, I look back at him, and I says, no. And he realized that I needed a little bit extra help. And so, as we kept going past the drop zone, before they could make the turn back the other way, he says, go. And he shoves me out of the airplane. And as he shoves me out of the airplane, I start tumbling through the sky very rapidly. And when you're tumbling through the sky, you see the ground and the sky very rapidly. Ground, sky. And what that means is you are completely out of position and you are not following any training that they have done for you. And I realized that I had forgotten to count. And I realized that the design of this program and this parachute training was you were supposed to get out of the airplane and you were supposed to fall and count for 10 seconds. If you miss the 10-second mark at 17 seconds, you have an automatic activation device that will fire off and help you slow things down and hopefully get you down to the ground safely. And so as this is starting to kick in, I'm starting to realize, wait a minute, I forgot to start counting. And maybe you guys have heard this statement. It says, you don't rise to the occasion, you fall to the level of your training. Well, in that moment, I was falling to the level of my training at terminal velocity, and it was freaking me out. So I began to start remember what the training said. I says, okay, Let me go ahead and arch my body like they trained me to. So arch my body. Once I did that, then I'm staring at the ground. Pull up in perfect position. But this ground is coming up really fast. And then I remember I forgot to count. So maybe let me just count 1 or 2 more Mississippis for you Southern folks. So I say 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. And then the rest of the training kicks in. 1 hand behind my head, another hand behind my back. Throw out the drag chute. As the drag chute comes out, it slowly pulls the parachute out. As the parachute comes out, everything stops very rapidly and slows down. And in that moment, I started realizing that it was working. The rest of the training kicks in. I look up, I see my parachute is good. My risers are good. My helmet's in place. My goggles are in place. My one-way transmitter still works. I can hear the guys on the ground telling me what to do next. And then I started looking around and realizing I am floating through the flipping sky. And I started screaming, I am on top of the world. And it was the coolest experience ever. And as I'm floating down to the ground, watching everything go by me and realizing that at some point I've got to actually bring this thing to a landing. And they asked me if I wanted to do it myself or if they wanted me, or if I wanted them to help me. And I said, you know what, I'm going to ask you to help me. So they said, turn left if you want to do it by yourself, turn right if you want us to help. So I turned right. And so as we're coming down, they say, ready, boom, and I hit the ground. And man, I hit that ground so freaking hard, it felt like somebody kicked me in my jaw. But, you know, any landing that you can walk away from, ask Chris to tell you it's a good landing. And so I got up and I walked away from the landing, and we recorded every single one of our jumps. And any idea how many seconds I fell from that airplane, sir? What's your name, sir? Yeah, you right there. Sid. Where you from, Sid?
Montgomery.
Montgomery. I've been to Montgomery a time or two. Any idea how many seconds I fell from that airplane, Sid? No? Right here next to Sid.
No idea.
No idea? Christy, come on, help me out.
Hey, 8 seconds.
8 seconds. Thank you, Christy. You know what's funny, John? A lot of times I do this to audiences, and I was with an audience recently and had a bunch of accountants, and the guy says 20 seconds, and I'm like, dude, did you not listen to what I just said? So I fell for about 4 seconds, Christy, and it felt like an eternity that I was falling and tumbling through that sky. Now, you probably were thinking that I was trained by some of the most elite Army parachute troopers that had a lot of experience, had thousands of jumps, and you'd be wrong. The really cool thing about this program is we were trained by fellow Air Force Academy college cadets. They were either the same age as me, maybe 1 or 2 years older than me, and they were training us to jump out of these perfectly good airplanes. Now, how and why in the earth would the Air Force decide to let young people whose frontal lobes haven't fully developed to jump out of airplanes first, and second, to let them teach other young people whose frontal lobes haven't fully developed to jump out of a perfectly good airplane? Well, the reason they could do that is because they had trusted training, trusted processes that allowed them to empower and trust those Air Force Academy cadets to teach people how to jump and to jump out of a perfectly good airplane. So my question to you today, as I get this thing started, is in your company, no matter what you do in this industry, whether you're a supplier, whether you're the cement that is the glue that holds this industry together, or you're on the front lines in any other capacity, my question to you is this. Is your training good enough to put people in the open door and push them out and trust them to pull their own parachute? If it's not, why not? And what can you do differently that will allow you to do that? So, I talk a lot about trust, and when I talk about trust, I want to start with the business case for trust. As I start with the business case for trust, what I want to show you guys is some stats that we learned about trust. So we looked at a study, they said with trust, if you have a high trust organization, on the left side, this is what organizations that have high trust get. And then on the right side, that's what individuals in a high trust organization get. 74% less stress, 40% less burnout, and 29% more satisfaction with their lives. That's what you get in a high trust organization. What's your trust level in your organization looking like? So now that I've talked to you about the business case for trust, I'm going to tell you some stats from a study that we did. And when we did the study, we looked at several different areas. And as we looked at it, one of the things that stood out in this study was 65% of working Americans, they researched the culture of a company before accepting a job with them. If people researched your company right now, what would they say? What would they see and what would they learn? And would they be attracted to your company? Or would they be repelled from your company, and why? Because when they're researching the culture of your company, they're trying to determine if they are a good fit and if you are a good fit. And so as we look at that, then I want to talk to you about another level of trust. When I talk to you about another level of trust, I want you to think about a higher level of trust. This higher level of trust, I want you to imagine Delta Force operators in the middle of the night going to take out a terror cell. I want you to think about Navy SEAL Team 6 in the dark of the night, jumping out of an airplane over the open ocean to land on a Navy vessel for 3 snipers to take a single shot to rescue an American hostage. When I talk about this higher level of trust, I want you to think about those Air Force Special Operations air crews that are flying Delta Force, that are flying SEAL Team 6 in the middle of the night, low level, 50 feet off the ground, night vision goggles, landing in austere environments that they've never seen a day in their life, and they have to land plus or minus 30 seconds of the intended time on target, or people's lives will be in the balance. I want you to think about what I call no-fail trust. No-fail trust is built on 3 pillars. These 3 pillars, it's trusted training, trusted processes, and then being able to trust and empower your people based on the training and the processes. When I talk about this idea of trust, no-fail trust, I define it as being able to deliver when jobs and lives are on the line, being able to deliver when the stakes are high, and being able to deliver when failure is not an option. I would submit to each of you in this room that in your industry, failure is not an option. No matter what it is that you do in the industry, failure is not an option. And so, as I talk about this idea of no-fail trust, I then start thinking about my experiences in pilot training. When I graduated the Air Force Academy in 2001, the Air Force said, congratulations, you now get to go to pilot training. So I went to Columbus, Mississippi, learned how to fly airplanes, and the amazing thing is the Air Force has a way of upping the ante, so to speak. Because before I went to pilot training, they sent me to get a private pilot license. And by the way, any pilots in the room? No? Cool, I can tell you guys all kinds of lies and nobody knows the truth. I gotta set the stage first before I start telling lies. But here's the thing, I learned how to fly airplanes in a Cessna 172. You could pedal a bike downhill faster than I could fly a Cessna 172. So then I get to Columbus, Mississippi, and the Air Force says, congratulations, you now get to fly jets. So there it is, I'm a young kid, 21, 22 years old, and I am flying twin-engine jets that go 300-400 miles an hour. And then they up the ante one more time. They said, hey, congratulations, we'll now have you fly an airplane 300-400 miles an hour, inches away from another young person whose frontal lobe isn't fully developed and can't legally rent a car from Hertz Rental Car without extra insurance. And let's just make sure you guys don't swap paint with each other and crash or anything like that. Pretty impressive. And they were able to do this, again, because of trusted training, trusted processes that empower us when we set in those jets to fly them. And then once I graduated, got my wings, and went off to my actual weapon system, they allowed me to fly the C-130 aircraft. Now, the C-130 aircraft you see in this picture, to me, that is the most beautiful aircraft that the Air Force ever made in its inventory. Now, what I want you to understand about the C-130 aircraft is that we have a combat crew of 6 people. That combat crew complement goes a little bit like this. In the front left seat, you got an aircraft commander. In the right seat, you got a co-pilot. Right behind us, there's a flight engineer, and they know where all the buttons, knobs, and rheostats in the airplane are at. Then to our rear right, we have a navigator. The navigator, they're there to help us navigate through treacherous terrain, treacherous environments, and keep us safe in any kind of environments that we find ourselves in. And then at the back of the airplane, we have one of the most valuable crew members on that aircraft, our load master. Now, our load masters are typically 17, 18, 19 years old, fresh out of high school, video game experts, possibly dwelling in John's basement or his crawl space, and they're the ones who are in the back of that airplane making a lot of decisions. Now, let me ask you all a question. Ma'am, what's your name? Yes, ma'am, you. Amanda, what do you do in the industry, Amanda? Vice president for a concrete company? Awesome. Out of where? Nashville. Awesome. Ashley? Amanda. I was close, man. I'm messing up this morning. Amanda, please don't challenge my eye strength right now, Amanda. She's going to show me her name tag like I can read that good. I know I fly airplanes, but my eyes aren't that good anymore, Amanda. Amanda, would you trust a 17, 18, 19-year-old fresh out of high school video game expert, possibly dwelling in John's basement? Would you trust them? You look like you drive a really nice car as a VP. Would you trust them with your nice car? Probably not. That's a no. Sir, right here. Yes, you.
Yes.
What's your name, sir? Where are you from?
Frank from Silicaga.
Frank from where?
Silicaga, just below Birmingham.
Silicaga. I have never heard that. I've been to Birmingham a few times, but I never heard of Silicaga.
The metropolis.
Metropolis. It sounds like a good metropolis, Frank. Sure, I passed by Metropolis many times going to Birmingham when I was in pilot training. Frank, would you trust same-sex young person with your book of business?
I'm sorry, one more time?
Would you trust same-sex young person with your book of business?
Negative.
Negative. I appreciate that. Sir, right here in the blue t-shirt. What's your name, sir? What do you do?
Don, I'm a QC manager,
Don, QC manager for what kind of company?
Concrete, Knoxville, Tennessee.
Concrete, Knoxville, Tennessee. Don, would you trust same-sex young person with your life? No. Here's the reality, folks. We trust those young people in the back of our airplanes with our lives every single day. Those load masters, they are responsible to load the aircraft. They are responsible for determining where things in that aircraft go. Does it go in the front of the aircraft or does it go in the back of the aircraft? Do I use a 5,000-pound strap or a 10,000-pound strap? Do I use a material strap or do I use chains? And then they have to calculate fuel and other calculations. Those young people are responsible for more than 80% of my aircraft at any given time. And if they make the wrong decision, something catastrophic can happen when we take off and or when we land. So we put our lives in their hands every single day when we go out and fly these airplanes all around the world, performing the mission that the Air Force happens to do. So now I want you to imagine with me for a second that you're on a mission with me, and as we're on this mission, I want you to imagine that we're sitting in the cockpit of that C-130 airplane. We're at 20,000 feet, middle of the night, dimly moonlit night. And I want you to imagine that we're over the country of Iraq, circa 2003, 2004. And as you're sitting in that seat at 20,000 feet, we got 60 Army soldiers and 2 pilots of their equipment in the back of our aircraft. And our mission today is to take those 60 Army soldiers into Baghdad International Airport. Once we download those soldiers, we're going to load up 60 Marines and 2 pilots of their equipment, and we're going to get them out of the combat zone. And as you're sitting in the right seat, we are now preparing to run our combat entry checklist. As we prepare to run our combat entry checklist, we'll remove our regular headsets, we'll don our gunmetal gray helmets, we'll drop our night vision goggles down into position. The night sky will light up with a green glow, allowing us to see the terrain as well as to see the threats that are out there designed to take us out of the sky. We'll run that combat entry checklist, and then we'll come up to the front, and we will finish with the flight engineer saying checklist complete. Once that engineer says checklist complete, we will then prepare to bring the throttles back to the idle position. We'll point the nose down to the ground, and we'll start going as fast as we can, avoiding the threats as we navigate safely in the Baghdad International Airport. As you're sitting there in that right seat, you're checking to make sure that everything is in place, and you're following along with every single thing that I'm doing. And as we start descending down into the midst of chaos, we're running additional checks for distance and altitude. At 20 miles, we do another check. At 15 miles, we do one more check. At 10 miles, it is our last opportunity to do a 360-degree turn to get us safely at the right altitude and the right airspeed to ingress into the airfield safely. As we continue descending, we will get closer and closer to the airfield. At 1 mile away from the airstrip, we will be 300 feet above the ground. At that point, we'll start slowing the aircraft down, we'll start getting the gear down, the flaps down, and we'll start getting fully configured to land this airplane safely. And as we're about 50 feet above the ground, the runway will start coming underneath the nose of the airplane. I will start looking towards the end of the runway so that I can maintain lateral disposition left and right of the center line. And as we're about to make the perfect landing, I begin to bring the throttles back nice and easy towards the idle position, about to make the perfect landing. And in that moment that I'm about to make the perfect landing, I will hear the loadmaster say, go around. When that loadmaster says go around, I don't hesitate, I don't pause, I don't question what that young person is now directing me to do. Immediately, I add full power to the airplane. I bring the nose of the aircraft to 7 degrees nose high. I look over to my co-pilot and I say flaps to 50%. You take your left hand and you bring the flap D10 to that 50% position. As you bring the flaps up, then we begin to gain flying airspeed once again. As we begin to gain flying airspeed, we start climbing away from the ground. As we start climbing away from the ground, you will then say positive rate, letting me know that we're actually climbing away from the ground. And as we start climbing away from the ground, I will then tell you gear up. You reach over with your left hand, grab the gear handle, and bring the gear to the up position. And as that happens, we will continue climbing safely away from the ground and safely away from whatever the danger was. And it's not until we're safely away from whatever the danger is that I will then say, Loadmaster, why did we go around? And that young person in the back of the airplane will succinctly and precisely say, Pilot, the reason I commanded and directed you, the CEO of the aircraft, to go around was because I was able to see a vehicle that you were unaware of. Pilot. The reason I, the young person in the back of the airplane that can't see out of the front, directed you, the aircraft commander, the CEO, to go around was because there was a gear malfunction. Pilot. The reason I commanded you to go around was because I could see what you could not see. That young person, that loadmaster that's in the back of our airplane, they are able to see so many things that we up front, the aircraft commander, the pilots, are unable to see, and they are able to direct and command that go around, and they are able to see our blind spots. My question for you this morning is this. In your organization, who are those young people? Who are those loadmasters? Who are those people that are able to see your blind spots that you're unable to see? Who are those people who are on the front lines? And more importantly, when they command and direct you to go around, do you listen? Why or why not? You see, if we don't follow the commands and directions of those loadmasters, something catastrophic could happen. Perhaps in your organizations, there are people that are on the front lines that are seeing things that you never will have the ability to see because of where you are in that organization. Perhaps it's your drivers. Perhaps it's the people that's laying asphalt. Perhaps it's the people that's laying the concrete or mixing the concrete. Perhaps it's those people that are actually out there doing sales. The people in your organization that are able to see what you're unable to see, they're seeing your blind spots. When they say go around, do you listen? And more importantly, when they say go around, do you trust them? You see, we are able to trust those young people, and we are able to allow them to direct us to do something different than planned because we know what kind of training they've gone through, we know what kind of process they've gone through, and we know that we've empowered them as a result of the training and the processes that we've put them through. In your organizations right now, what does that look like? Are your people truly empowered? Or do you just say you're empowered and you really don't have anything to back that empowerment up? And if you recognize that, what can you do differently today to change that? See, at any given time, what's happening in the back of that airplane is those loadmasters, those young people, as well as the rest of the air crew, they're operating with 7 critical skill sets. These 7 critical skill sets: professional knowledge, situational awareness, assertiveness, decision-making, communication, leadership, adaptability, and flexibility. At any given time, all of those things are in play. And this is what we prepare them with so that they can solve problems. For each of you in this room, if I were to rate you 1 to 10, or you were to rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10, what would you look like in each of these areas? How balanced would your skill sets be? And then beyond yourself, how are you training the people on your teams to have these skill sets? And how balanced would they be with their skill sets? And would they be positioned to solve problems when it's time to solve problems? Because the reality is that preparation is the fuel that allows problems to be solved. That loadmaster has a lot of training behind them each time they go out there and fly a mission. They are prepared to solve problems at any given time, no matter what's put in front of them. Right now in your organization, the people that are out there executing the mission, from the C-suite to the front lines, are they prepared to solve problems? Or are you getting the calls in the middle of the night because they don't know how to solve a problem and they need your help to solve that problem because they don't have the proper training, they don't have the proper processes, standard operating procedures, and checklists in place to allow them to solve the problems based on their training. It's all about preparing people to be able to solve problems at any given time. So now, I want you guys to just everybody take a deep breath in and let it out. Man, I spelled tequila, I'm just kidding. So, this is the cockpit of my Boeing 777 airplane that I fly for an airline. Now, before you ask me what airline, I'm going to tell you this. We might lose your bags, but we won't beat you up, sir. And if you say Spirit, we're going to fight. But in this picture, this is the cockpit of my aircraft. Now, I want you to answer me this. Any idea how many buttons, knobs, and rheostats are in the cockpit of my Boeing 777 airplane? Sir, right here on the edge of the blue shirt. Any idea how many buttons, knobs, and rheostats are in the cockpit of my airplane? No? Sir, what's your name?
Jim.
Jim, what do you do, Jim?
Sales.
Sales. Jim, sales, connection, communication. Can you just give me a guess, Jim? Can you give me a guess how many button knobs and wrist out there? No, you Jim. She's like, no, we're not making a sale today, folks. Granville, any idea how many buttons knobs and wrist sets are in the cockpit?
Let's go with 300.
300. Thank you for playing along, Granville. I appreciate it. Sir, gentleman right behind Granville. What's your name, sir?
Josh.
Josh, what do you do, Josh?
I'm a QC manager with Southern Country Products.
Cool, QC manager. QC, you get the number thing, right? Any idea how many buttons, knobs, and rheostats are in this airplane?
It's a 100.
100. Cool. Man right behind Josh. What are you doing? What's your name?
I'm Chelsea and I'm in sales.
Chelsea, you're in sales. Are you going to give me a Jim answer or are you going to give me a you answer?
Now I would say a lot.
How many do you think, Chelsea?
500.
500. Wonderful. Well, the good news, John, is that people don't think we're playing the Price is Right. And perhaps there's some young person here who has absolutely no idea what I'm talking about. The reality is, Chelsea, that there are over 500 buttons, knobs, and rheostats in the cockpit of my Boeing 777 airplane. Now, I know exactly what you're thinking, sir. You're wondering, Jason, well, do you know what they all mean? I'll tell you the truth, and I'll tell you a secret we promise not to tell. No. But for those who are afraid to fly, don't be afraid. Just trust me, right? The reality is that in the cockpit of my Boeing 777 airplane, while there are over 500 buttons, knobs, and rheostats, what's most important is not that I know what every single thing does, but what's most important is that I know the right button at the right time for the right reason. The right button at the right time for the right reason. Your industry, whatever you do in this industry, you likely have a lot of things you have to know. When you're doing a contract, there's a lot of things you have to know to get a bid on that contract. When you're actually performing the contract, you name it, there's probably a lot of regulations and all these pieces of information that you have to know. But what matters most is that you understand the right piece of information at the right time for the right reason. And Jim, when you're making a sale, you got to know exactly what you're selling to, who you're selling to, right? Right button at the right time for the right reason. And beyond knowing that, it's also critical that we have the ability to teach the people on our team that same skill set for them to know the right button at the right time for the right reason. Now, the airline industry, what's amazing is we utilize simulators to help us train to a certain standard so that you, the flying public, can feel safe each time you get on one of my airplanes. And so we do that by repetitive training. We do that by systematic training and trusted training with followed by processes, standard operating procedures, our checklist that allows us to know what button to hit at the right time. So that when we're over the Atlantic Ocean in the middle of the night, you're sound asleep, and the fit hits the shed in the middle of the night, I don't panic up front. I know exactly what I have to do and exactly how to do it and when to do it. And if it's something that's going to be catastrophic immediately, I need to be able to react immediately. And if it's something that I can handle later on the ground, then I have time to think about it later. I have time to go look up what that specific issue is. And again, for you, what is that right button at the right time for the right reason? That right piece of information, and not just good enough for you to know it, but how are you teaching those that are coming behind you how to understand that? As I talked to some of you all about the challenges in this industry, the one thing that stood out was everyone said that personnel is a challenge. Everyone is trying to find the right talent, to hire the right talent, and then how to retain the right talent within your organizations. When you start looking at your training program, your onboarding program, and how you bring people into your organizations, how you train them, that is a piece of how you actually retain the right talent. So understand not just how to teach it, but how to also observe it, how to evaluate it, and to make sure that when the fit hits the shed for them, when they're out there in the field doing the job, that they understand how to choose the right button at the right time for the right reason. So when I talk about this right button, right time for the right reason, one of the things that I then transition to talk about is the culture of an organization. I showed you the stat at the front of the program about people looking at the culture of the organization before they show up. And then once people are inside of your organizations, once you've hired them, they're still evaluating what your culture looks like. Are you creating a culture of commitment within your organization? That commitment to the team, to the mission, to the organization, to the values. Are you creating the kind of culture that people are excited to show up to work every single day? And what was amazing is I had a conversation last night and somebody said, look, man, here's the deal. This industry Laying concrete, laying asphalt, driving trucks, it's really not all that sexy. It says, but we have to figure out how do we attract people to our industry and how do we retain them in our industry. The way you do that is with your culture. What kind of culture are you all creating in your organizations? And then when I talk about culture, I then like to talk about leadership. What's the leadership in your organization look like? Because the reality and the fact of the matter is that 77% of working Americans, they will leave a company if they don't feel like they can trust their leadership. They'll leave a company if they don't feel like they can trust their leadership. What's the leadership in your company look like? And are people being repelled by the leadership? Or are they actually being retained because of the leadership and because of the culture that the leaders are creating? So when I talk leadership, I like to break it down into 3 distinctive personas. Now this isn't about a job title, this is just personas. There's the leader, there's the manager, and there's the boss. The boss, you all know the type. Do as I say, not as I do. Shut up and color. I have an open door policy, not for you to come in, but for me to come out micromanaging. When I talk about that boss person, you guys have possibly seen that person in your organization, possibly seen them in another organization you work for. The manager. They want to manage people like they manage a spreadsheet. You lead people, you don't manage them. And then the leader. You all know the type. They lead with compassion, they lead with kindness, they lead with empathy. And let me not forget to make sure I say this very clearly and succinctly. They lead with accountability. Accountability for themselves, and they hold their people accountable. You all know the type. Now let me invite you to take a trip down memory lane. I want you to go back into your mind to when you first came to the workplace. I want you to think about that person that you worked with or you worked for. Was that person a leader, a manager, or a boss? And why? Now, perhaps some of you had a very visceral response because you thought about that person who was a total donkey, and you thought about that person who likely should have been called Richard. Forgive me, anybody who's named Richard in the room. And you had a visceral response in a negative way. And then perhaps some of you had a visceral response in a good way. You got that warm and fuzzy feeling because you remember that person that took you under their wing, that mentored you, that guided you, that coached you, and is probably partly responsible for you sitting in this room as a leader in this industry today because they were a true leader. Now, I want you to think about in present day, and I want you to answer this internally. If I went into your workplace and I talked to the people that you work with, or you worked for, or that worked for you, what would they say about you? Would they say that you're a leader, a manager, or a boss? And why? Now, somebody here is probably saying, well, Jason, that's subjective, and you are absolutely right, it's extremely subjective. But you and I both know where you fall in that spectrum. And I don't care where you fall in that spectrum from leader to boss. What I care about is that you understand the requirements of what it means to be a leader. What I care about is that you understand that leaders lead, managers manage, and bosses bark. What I care about is that you show up every day as a leader. You show up every day working to get 0.1% better every single day. Because as leaders, it is very, very important, very imperative that as leaders we show up every single day and that we earn the title of leader in every single thing that we do. From getting it right to how we recover from making mistakes, because that is what leaders do. Your obligation here, folks, as leaders in this industry, leaders in your organizations, is to show up every day earning your title of leader every single day by your actions and your interactions with the people you work with and the people that work for you. That is your obligation, to earn that title of leader. How can you do that? We earn the title of leader, we create these cultural commitment by creating psychological safety. Psychological safety is very important because that allows people to feel safe to be able to speak up without fear of retribution. Here's the definition. The belief that you won't be punished or humiliated for speaking with ideas, questions, concerns, or mistakes. Anybody ever been in that environment where you're sitting around the proverbial table and the boss is sitting at the head of the table? Somebody speaks up and they say, go around, or they say, hey, I think I see something wrong, or we should do it differently. And that person, they pull out their proverbial shotgun, everybody backs away from the table, and poof, before you know it, there's brain matter all over the walls. And everybody steps back, puts their head down and decides that I'm not going to say anything and I'm not going to point out anybody's mistake because I don't want to be the next victim. Anybody ever seen that happen? I've seen it happen. That's a lack of psychological safety. And you better believe those people are going to stop bringing their problems, they're going to stop bringing the challenges, and they're going to stop pointing out the things that can be made better in the organization, things that can make the environment safer, things that can make us more efficient and more effective in how we deal with things. And here's the interesting thing that we found in our study. 77% of working Americans need to feel psychologically safe in a company before they can see themselves staying with them long term. Now, Granville, you and I, we had a great conversation last night. We talked about that there might be some folks there a little bit older than me. I know I look about 25, if you're looking at the good chocolate side. But perhaps some of you all are a little bit older and been in the industry a little bit for quite a while. And you've seen the environment be completely different now than what it was when you first came in the industry. You know, when I started learning how to fly C-130s, the way they trained us, that flight engineer that sat behind me, he had the like 5 or 6 D-cell battery mag light. And when we messed up, he'd crack us in the back of the head or hit us in the arm and check us and let us know that we were screwing things up. Now, everybody in here knows, and Grandma and I had a good laugh about it last night. You try that today, and you already know there's a lawsuit coming, right? So the reality is that things have changed a bit in the environments that we're working in. And one of the biggest things is we have to figure out how do we create psychological safety as leaders. That's part of creating that commitment culture. Create that safe space for people to speak up, for people to say, go around. And let me be really clear right now and say this. The one thing that I am not saying and what I'm not advocating to be very clear is I'm not talking about coddling people. We create that space for people to speak up and say something, but we also make sure and certain that we hold people accountable at every step of the way. And that's how you create that culture. Psychological safety, as we know, is it's not given by a title, it's earned through trust. If every time somebody speaks up and they see that shotgun come out, they're going to stop saying things and they're not going to feel like they can be trusted to speak up and voice their concerns. If you got somebody who's out there in the field doing the job and they realize how dangerous it is, they realize they actually didn't get quality training, are they going to be comfortable speaking up, or are they going to actually just back off and not say anything? What kind of culture are you creating in your organizations? Easy way that you can do this as leaders. Give people 3 things that they want. People want to be heard, they want to be understood, and they want to be acknowledged. Are you creating this space for people to be heard, to be understood, and to be acknowledged? And the interesting thing is, I see a lot of men in here, and perhaps you're like me, you have a wife at home who's an amazing person, but she's also the chief humbling officer in my house. And my wife always loves to correct me when I'm wrong, and she loves to actually tell me how to get better. So when I showed her this, I was really excited about it. My wife said, honey, that's cool, that's great. And she gave me the example. She says, here's the deal, honey. She says, when I tell you to take out the trash, I know you heard me because you were in earshot. Your hearing ain't that bad yet. She says, I know you understood me because we speak the same language. And she said, you acknowledged me because you looked and you shook your head yes. She says, and that's not enough when I ask you to take out the trash. She says, you have to take action. As leaders, we have to hear our people, we have to understand them, we have to acknowledge them, and then beyond that, we have to take action. Sometimes that action is just the acknowledgement to let them know we've heard it, but we can't actually do anything about that right now, and here's the reason why. And sometimes it's we hear, understand, and acknowledge it, and we say, got it, we'll get on that right away because that is a safety issue, and we will address it to make sure that your safety and the safety of everyone else in our organization is not put in jeopardy. But that's what we do when we're creating these commitment cultures that I'm talking about. We hear people, we understand them, we acknowledge them, and then we take action for what they bring to us. That is our charge. Now, last thing I want to cover with you guys is something I kind of started with when I talked about Chris. That's connection. Yeah, I know when you guys are looking at this, it always gets the women. They're like, oh, that's my beautiful daughter. She's a bit bigger now. She's 10. And when she was 2 years old, I decided to give her a donut. The coolest thing is watching a 2-year-old lick the sugar off the top of a donut. And then what I realized is the donuts wasn't just about me eating a bacon donut, because I love bacon on a donut, right? But more importantly, what I realized is that it was about connection. As I sat there with this 2-year-old, as she continued to grow and get older, we would do this every Friday before I took her to daycare. And what ended up happening is we created an unshakable bond with each other. She's actually upstairs, still passed out in the room right now. We're going to hang out the rest of the weekend because we have this amazing bond. It was all about connection that leads to commitment, that leads to accountability, that then leads to trust. That's how I create connection with my daughter. I occasionally use donuts with the people that I lead and the people that I get to work with. For you, how do you create connection? How do you create connection with those people in your organization? I love what you guys did last night, Granville, with the Rogers group, where you guys had the little bonfire, got bombarded a little bit. How kind of you guys to allow the bombardment to happen. But you guys created that space for connection. John, you guys are going to put beach chairs out this afternoon, and you guys are creating a space for connection within this association. But how do you create connection with the people on your teams? I talked about how Chris and I created a connection with each other, and we've never met in person. I use donuts to create connection. What are you going to do to create connection with the people that matters most to you? From a personal level, to make sure that your significant other doesn't turn into your insignificant other, to your team members, to make sure that they understand that you actually care for them, that you care about them, and that you want to see them succeed. Perhaps some of you are trying to figure out how do you retain your talent. How do you retain the top talent, and how you continue to have them being committed to your organization? It's by creating a commitment culture where they know you're committed to them, where they know you're connected to them, that you care about them, and they in turn will then be committed to the organization, realizing that they matter. This is just a simple way that you can create that space for people to realize they matter. And in certain cases, people will turn down that other job that pays them another $1 an hour because they know at this company, at your company, they actually matter, and they know that you care about them. I create connection with donuts. How are you going to create connection with people that matter for you? So I know a lot of you guys are taking pictures of the slides. I really appreciate that. I'd love to get your feedback. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but if you will be willing to give me some feedback, take a picture of the QR code. I'd love to get your feedback to see how I'm doing. I read all of these feedback surveys so that I can work to be better every time I deliver this program. And then the other thing that I'll do is I'll provide you guys, if you give me your email, I won't spam you, I promise. I'll provide you guys with a PDF workbook that goes along with this that you can take back and use in your organizations. We'll also provide you some free videos and access to a free leadership training course that we have with our company. So I won't leave this up based on time, but if you will give me the feedback, I'd love it, and I'm happy to put this back up or give it to you later on. So I want to open it up for a few minutes. We've got time for a couple of questions. I want to open it up for a couple of questions before I close out with a final parting thought. Anybody have any questions that I can answer or give you my perspective? Yes, sir, in the back.
Jason, I don't think your talk is probably one of the best things we've had here at these associated meetings. In the concrete industry, and I would think most people in this room would agree, I think what keeps us from having that camaraderie and that trust that you guys have in your training in the military is egos. And that word trust is probably the largest detriment to what we do as an industry as a whole.
Yes, sir. What's your name?
Dwayne,
Dwayne. Where you from, Dwayne? What do you do?
Clarksville, Tennessee, run a ready-mix plant.
Wonderful. Dwayne, I appreciate that input. You know what's interesting? If anybody paid attention to me over here on the side before I came on stage, you might have saw me with my eyes closed. I wasn't praying. What I was doing is I was actually checking my ego. So one of the things that I learned is that our egos are very necessary. Granville and I, we had a conversation last night about egos, right? And one of the things that I do when I get into certain environments, especially when it comes to leadership, Dwayne, is I make sure that I check my ego. And sometimes I'll do this actually publicly and out loud with my crew. We'll go around the room and everybody check their ego. I'm check my big ego. I'm not here to perform, I'm not here to put on a show. I'm check my little ego. Yep, I don't know a whole lot about the concrete industry. I'm not in the industry, but I do belong. I'm here serving in my purpose and my passion, and this is my ministry. And then each person goes around, and once we put it on the table as we check our egos, now we've level set the playing field. And so while I do agree with you, Dwayne, I do also agree that as leaders, as we earn that title of leader, we have to figure out and work to check our egos. Egos are absolutely necessary, they're essential. But there's a time and place where the ego comes out in front, and there's a time and place where we have to be willing and able to check our ego. Can you imagine if in that moment that load master says, go around and I'll check my ego? Can you imagine if in your business you have a driver out there on the front lines doing putting concrete down, and they come back to you and they tell you something that could be potentially catastrophic for the project, that could waste your money, that could get you sued by the client, or that could have you lose that contract and make it to where you can't get the next contract, and you allow your ego to lead. As they say, ego oftentimes writes checks that our rear ends can't cash. So the challenge as we're looking to be better leaders is to figure out how do we understand what our ego is doing, how do we understand what our ego is leading the way, and how do we understand how to check our ego at the appropriate time. And even more important in this current environment, realizing that a lot of us are at an age that we've been in the industry for 20, 30 years plus. And there are people that are coming into the industry and they don't know more than what we have forgotten. And while our ego says, I want to tell them that, maybe it's a moment and an opportunity to set the ego aside to actually connect with that person and then begin to find out a little bit about them and learn how they learn what they need to be successful. And in that moment that we put that ego aside, perhaps we'll find out that that person is one of the most talented people that we've hired in a long time. And perhaps we'll create that environment that we're looking to create. So egos are definitely important, Wayne, and we do have to know how to actually check our egos, put them aside, to actually get to where we're getting to. Yes, sir.
So on that same kind of topic, how do you, so I perceive working with my coworkers in our organization, we're a team and it's for everybody's benefit to work together. But sometimes you work with somebody that refuses, maybe ego, but how do you work around when you're encountering somebody that is struggling to not be a team?
Awesome. What's your name, sir?
Greg Beasley.
Greg Beasley. Where you from, Greg?
I'm from North Georgia, but I cover the Alabama, Tennessee, Mississippi, and Kentucky territory.
Awesome, Greg. And what do you do in the industry?
I sell ready mix plants.
Cool. You sell ready-mix plants. And you're asking the question, what happens when somebody doesn't want to get in line? Right?
Yeah.
The reality is this. I'll be straight up and tell you, Greg. One of the things I said is leadership is about accountability. It's not about coddling people. When it comes to people that are on my team, I need you to understand what the mission is. I need you to actually understand how we're going to get the mission done. If you're not ready to go into combat, I'm not taking you into combat. Well, I understand this industry isn't a military organization. The reality is that you guys are in the combat of life and in the combat of business. And if you aren't ready to get the job done, then I'm going to kindly let you know you aren't ready. I won't take you into combat. If it's an organization in a corporate environment like yours, I'm going to let you know kindly. You have a set amount of time to understand how we do things. I will make certain that I get you trained accordingly to execute the mission, but once I give you the training that's a trusted training and trusted processes, and you can't follow that, then I'm going to kindly try to help you find a better opportunity that's better suited for your skills. Some of us are afraid to make those hard calls. Some of us are afraid to hurt someone's feelings. When it comes to business, I'm not worried about hurting your feelings. I'm not going to be disrespectful, and I'm not going to be unkind, but I am going to make you understand that we have a culture, we have a mission, and we will get the mission done with or without you. So that's my stance on it. But the other side of it is this, Greg. When I have someone that isn't performing, I need to make sure that I've done my part, my job to make sure that they're trained properly, validate that they understand the training, then I need to make sure that they understand the processes, validate that they understand that, how to execute that. And then once that happens, and I can clearly and emphatically say that I've given them that training, those processes, and they then proceed to not perform, it's at that point that I will then say, let's find a better place for you to go. Whether it's in this company or elsewhere in another company, but what we can't have is dead weight pulling us down. And so we have to be willing to step up as leaders and make that call. And sometimes the sooner we make that call, the better. So that means we got to do the training and the processes as soon as we can up front with the onboarding piece to make sure that they got what they need so that we can evaluate if they're ready to rock and roll. If they're not, they got to go. One last question, I'll close with some parting thoughts. No questions? Yes, sir.
Started out your presentation saying you were scared when you jumped out of the airplane. I know this wasn't the topic of your program today, but what was the next time you were scared and mission in Iraq or Afghanistan?
The next time that I was scared of flying
The
the
most scared you would be in a place, better place.
The most scared I have been, ooh, man, that's an interesting question, John, because I've had a lot of scary moments. You know, I've had rockets fired at me. I've had small arms fired at my aircraft. And those moments are scary. You know, when it's the middle of the night, those night vision goggles, when you're flying with those on, and someone shoots a rocket up at you, what ends up happening is either the aircraft system will automatically kick off flares, or you punch the plunger, the loadmaster or the navigator will punch the plunger and they'll kick out the flares. Those flares are really bright because they burn really hot to try to divert that weapon off of you. And it wipes out the goggles, so literally it goes blank for a second and you can't see anything. And so if you're quick, you'll close your eyes, but the reality is it happens so fast you can't close your eyes. So the first time it happens and you make a maneuver to try to get away from that weapon, and you think, man, we almost bit it there, right? And then another one comes, you gotta go the other direction, and you're fighting this thing all the way down, and you went from 20,000 feet or wherever you're at, and you've lost 10,000 feet trying to get away from this weapon. That's pretty scary. But I think the next thing that I would say is when I almost had a collision with an unmanned vehicle. So it was a Predator aircraft, and it was flying into our airspace, so it's an unmanned aerial vehicle and whatnot. It's about the size of my airplane I was flying in, flying some small planes in Iraq when I was in special operations. And we were doing a mission, and I had a crew in the back of the aircraft, and as that's happening, I'm watching the guy come through my airspace. And when it first happens, you're like, no big deal. And as it keeps coming, you start telling the controllers, like, hey man, this guy's in my airspace. And you realize if I go higher, I'll be in the ice, I don't want to do that because that creates a danger. I don't want to go down lower because there's some other things to the mission. And you're trying to figure it out. And before you know it, here I was max performing this little airplane. And we were right on the stall speed. So when you're in an airplane, you're on stall speed, you get this little horn, it's going off, and it's screaming at you, telling you, hey idiot, you need to level out the wings, you need to add power, or else this thing is going to tumble out of the sky if you go any slower. And we're literally on the stall point, I'm max performing this airplane to get out of the way of this little small unmanned aerial vehicle, realizing that I got my crew in the back of the airplane, and realizing if I screw this up, either that unmanned aerial vehicle is going to crash into us, or I'm going to stall this aircraft out. Neither of which are going to be good. And oh, by the way, it's not just my life, but it's 3 or 4 other people's lives in the balance. And that was probably one of the scariest moments that I've had in combat with regards to flying that I can actually recall in this moment. A lot of them I've put behind me, but that's one that kind of comes to mind. And it's just in that moment that your training, your preparation that kicks in that allows you to say, I'm going to make a decision. I don't have time to really process the decision, analyze the decision, but I've got to execute right now to basically save our lives and get on the ground safely. So that's probably one of the scariest things I've been. So thanks for that question. So as I wrap it up, I want to share something with you guys that's a little bit more personal, because this is what No Fail Trust is all about. While I talk about leadership, I also want to make sure that I highlight personal leadership. And I had this moment where everything in my life stopped. I didn't have time to analyze, I didn't have time to think. My family and I, we were on vacation in another country, and I was woken up in the middle of the night at about 5 a.m. out of a dead sleep. There was an intruder, and this intruder was holding a knife to my 2-year-old nephew's throat. And in that moment, there was a lot of chaos, and I won't bore you with the rest of the details, but suffice to say, I had a choice I had to make in that moment. Now, that moment wasn't expected. That moment was not a moment that I could have planned for. But that was a moment that was mine, that I had to make a decision, I had to make a choice. And so in that moment, the choice that I made was to get the intruder to a position where I could control the situation, put my hand between that knife and my nephew's throat to basically save my nephew's life. And a lot of chaos ensued after that, and suffice to say my nephew is safe. And in that process, what I realized was that I didn't do what I did, I didn't make the choices that I made because I'm fearless. Because quite honestly, I was pretty scared. I was not even awake enough to know how scared I should have been in that moment. But I knew that there was a choice that had to be made because someone's life was in the balance. Now, for you all, your moment is going to come. Perhaps your moment won't be like mine with the knife. It won't be at 4,000 feet above the earth, staring at the ground, realizing a stupid decision that you made. It won't be flying airplanes in combat, but I promise you your moment is going to come. The question that I have for you today is this. When that moment shows up for you, are you going to have been the person that has built a team that can be trusted like lives depend on it? Are you going to be that person that has created the training and the processes and the culture that allows people to say go around when it's time to go around? Are you going to be that leader that is committed to taking action when it's time to take action? Because your moment is coming. You see, no fail trust, it is not a philosophy. It is a responsibility. For me in that moment, I had to have no fail trust with myself. Perhaps one of you all in this room is facing that moment where you're staring down and you're having to make a choice and you're having to figure out, can I trust myself to make a decision? You see, for me, I was able to do that because of the years of training, the years of preparation to be able to make those decisions at a moment's notice. When I talk about this no fail trust, again, it's not a philosophy. This is a responsibility. It's a way of living. It's a way of executing the mission when it matters most. My challenge to each and every one of you in this room is, what are you doing each and every day to earn your title of leader? And what are you doing each and every day to ensure you've created a culture that builds trust like your teams and their lives depend on it? Thank you.